The streets of Barcelona were unusually quiet that night. The cold wind howled through the narrow alleyways, carrying the faint scent of rain and the distant echoes of cheers from a nearby stadium. Matthias, a frail and shivering young man, stood outside a cafe, his fingers pressed against the glass as he stared at the massive television screen inside. The cafe was warm, glowing with golden lights, filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. But outside, Matthias was alone, his body aching from exhaustion, his stomach twisting in hunger. On the screen, the match was in full swing. Real Madrid versus Barcelona. His heart raced as his eyes locked onto one player, Cristiano Ronaldo. As the ball rolled towards Ronaldo's feet, Matthias whispered under his breath, his chapped lips moving almost involuntarily. He mimicked Ronaldo's movement, his fingers curling into fists as if he were the one on the field, ready to strike. For a moment, he forgot about the cold, the hunger, the emptiness inside him. But reality was cruel. He was not in a stadium. He was not on a field. He was standing on a frozen pavement, an invisible figure in a city that did not care whether he lived or died. His stomach clenched painfully, a sharp reminder that he had not eaten anything in 2 days. The last thing he had was a half-eaten sandwich someone had thrown away outside a bakery. He had never imagined his life would come to this. There was a time when he was just like any other young man, a dreamer, a fighter, a believer in fate. His father had been his biggest supporter, waking up at dawn to train with him, taking him to local matches, telling him he had the fire of a champion in his heart. And then, one day, it was all gone. A single accident had stolen everything from him. His father was taken away in an instant, leaving behind nothing but unpaid debts and shattered dreams. Matthias lost their home, their car, their life. Football, once his passion, had become a distant memory, a ghost of a life he could no longer claim. And yet, there was one thing he never let go of: Ronaldo. Through every hardship, every sleepless night on the streets, he had clung to his idol's journey like a lifeline. He watched Ronaldo's matches through shop windows, replayed his goals in his mind before sleeping on a cold bench, and imagined what it would be like to be on that field, just once, just for a second. Tonight, something inside him snapped. He could not keep living like this. A fire ignited inside him, stronger than the hunger, the cold, the hopelessness. If he could just see Ronaldo, if he could just talk to him, tell him how much he meant to him, maybe, just maybe, something would change. Matthias turned away from the cafe window, his breath visible in the freezing air. He started walking, his heart pounding with every step. The stadium was only a few streets away. He had to try. The stadium loomed in front of him like a giant fortress, its towering lights illuminating the night sky. The match had just ended. Fans poured out in waves, their voices a chaotic mixture of celebration and disappointment. Matthias moved through them, his body tense, eyes darting around desperately. He was looking for one place, the VIP exit. That was where the players left after the match. That was his only chance. His feet ached. His body begged him to stop, but he kept going. And then he saw it. A sleek black car was parked near the entrance. Security guards stood in rigid formation, watching every movement with sharp eyes. Behind the barriers, reporters and fans crowded, cameras flashing as they tried to get a glimpse of their heroes. Matthias pushed forward, his hands shaking. His heart was beating so fast it hurt. He saw Luka Modric walk out first, nodding to the crowd before getting into a car. Then came Toni Kroos, shaking a few hands before disappearing behind the tinted windows of another vehicle. And then he appeared, Cristiano Ronaldo. The stadium lights reflected off his sharp features as he stepped towards the car, dressed in a sleek black coat, his expression calm and unreadable. Matthias's breath hitched. This was it. His legs felt weak. His throat dried up. But then his mind screamed, "Say something! Now or never!" "Cristiano!" His voice cracked as he shouted, raw and desperate. The security guards immediately turned toward him. Matthias pushed forward, breaking past the first barrier. "Please, just 1 minute. he pleaded, his voice hoarse. The guards moved fast. Someone grabbed his arm, shoving him backward. His legs buckled and he stumbled, hitting the pavement hard. People around him barely noticed. He was just another homeless man causing trouble. Matias gritted his teeth, his eyes stinging with frustration. He tried again. "Cristiano, please, just listen to me." More hands grabbed him. He felt himself being dragged away. The cold pavement scraped against his skin as he struggled, his heart breaking into a million pieces. This was his last chance and it was slipping away. Then, everything stopped. A single voice cut through the chaos. "Wait!" The security guards froze. The crowd fell silent. Matias barely dared to breathe. He turned his head, his vision blurred, and saw Cristiano Ronaldo standing still, watching him. For a moment, their eyes met. There was no arrogance in Ronaldo's gaze, no irritation, just a quiet curiosity, a recognition of something unspoken. "Let him go." The security guards hesitated. "I said let him go." Ronaldo's voice was calm, but there was an authority in it that no one dared to challenge. Hands released Matias. His body sagged with relief. He scrambled to his feet, chest heaving, eyes locked onto the man he had worshipped for years. Ronaldo took a step forward. The cameras flashed wildly. "Why did you call me?" The words were simple, but they carried a weight that crushed Matias's chest. Matias opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His body trembled, not from fear, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer weight of this moment. Tears stung his eyes. He took a shaky breath, and then he spoke. The words spilled out, raw and unfiltered. His story, his pain, his dreams. How football had once been his life, how everything had crumbled around him, how he had spent the past 2 years surviving on the streets, never letting go of the hope that one day, just one day, he would play again. And through it all, he had watched Ronaldo. He had held on to his journey like a rope keeping him from drowning. Ronaldo listened, his face unreadable. Then, after a long silence, he took a breath, and he said something that no one expected. "Tomorrow, be at the training ground, 7 a.m. sharp." Silence. Matias stared at him, unable to move, unable to think. Had he heard correctly? Had his idol just... A million emotions crashed over him, too overwhelming to process. He opened his mouth, but before he could respond, Ronaldo turned and walked away. Matias stood frozen, the noise of the world fading into nothingness. His life had just changed forever. Matias stood frozen, his body still aching from the security guard's grip, his breath unsteady. His mind screamed at him to move, to say something, anything, but he was paralyzed. Cristiano Ronaldo was standing in front of him, not on a TV screen, not in a stadium filled with thousands of roaring fans. Here, right now, looking straight into his eyes. The world around him had faded into a blur, the flashing cameras, the murmurs of the crowd, the security guards waiting for instructions. All Matias could hear was the pounding of his own heartbeat, louder than the cheers that had echoed from the stadium just moments ago. Ronaldo's expression was unreadable, his sharp eyes scanning Matias from head to toe. He was used to fans screaming his name, chasing his car, begging for autographs. But this was different. "Why did you call me?" His voice was firm, but not unkind. There was something in his tone. Curiosity, maybe even recognition. Matias felt his throat close up. His fingers trembled as he clutched the sides of his worn-out jacket, feeling the fabric between his fingertips as if grounding himself in reality. He had to speak. A million words flooded his mind, but none seemed good enough. He had imagined this moment so many times, lying on the cold pavement at night, staring at the empty sky, picturing what he would say if he ever met his idol. But now that it was happening, he felt like a child again, weak, voiceless, afraid. His voice cracked. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet Ronaldo's gaze. "I had no one else to call." Ronaldo's expression did not change, but his eyes flickered with something. An understanding, a recognition of pain. Matthias took a shaky breath. And then, the words started pouring out, raw and unfiltered. I was supposed to be a footballer. I trained every day. I lived for the game. My father, he believed in me. He was my coach, my best friend. We used to watch your matches together, study your moves, dream that one day, I would be on that field. His voice trembled, but he kept going. And then one night he was gone, just like that. A car accident. He left home to pick up my boots for a trial match the next morning. He never came back. A lump formed in his throat, but he pushed through it. After that, everything fell apart. We lost our home. I lost my chance. I lost everything. But I never lost you. Ronaldo's gaze did not waver. The cameras were still flashing, the reporters whispering, but he did not look away. Matthias exhaled sharply, his fingers curling into fists. You kept me going. Every time I wanted to give up, every time I thought I could not survive another day, I watched you. I watched how you fought, how you never gave up. I told myself, if Cristiano Ronaldo could keep going, so could I. His voice dropped, barely a whisper. I just wanted to say thank you, even if you never saw me. Even if you never saw me, even if I was nothing but a shadow in the streets, you saved me. For the first time, Ronaldo's expression changed. His jaw tightened slightly. He took a deep breath, then glanced at his team manager, whispering something only he could hear. The manager's brows furrowed, but he nodded. Matthias's breath hitched. Was this it? Was Ronaldo about to leave? Had he said too much? Then, without a word, Ronaldo reached for the hem of his jersey and pulled it over his head. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Matthias's body stiffened as Ronaldo signed his jersey right there, in front of everyone, and held it out to him. Matthias stared at it, unable to process what was happening. His hands hovered over the fabric as if afraid to touch it, as if it might disappear. Take it. Ronaldo's voice was softer now, but firm. It is yours. Matthias's fingers finally closed around the jersey. It was warm. It smelled like sweat and victory and everything he had ever dreamed of. Tears burned his eyes. His entire body trembled. He could not remember the last time someone had given him something, not just out of pity, but out of respect. And then, Ronaldo did something that left everyone speechless. He crouched down, right there, in front of the cameras, in front of his fans, in front of the world. Cristiano Ronaldo bent down and began untying his own football boots. The security guards exchanged bewildered looks. The crowd murmured in shock. Reporters raised their cameras, realizing they were capturing history. Matthias's legs nearly gave out as Ronaldo pulled off his boots and held them out to him. Wear these tomorrow, he said. Come to our training session. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Matthias blinked, convinced he had misheard. His breath came out in short, shallow bursts. His fingers gripped the jersey so tightly his knuckles turned white. Tomorrow? Training? His mind could not keep up. This was not just an act of charity. This was an opportunity. A door being opened. Matthias finally found his voice, though it came out in a whisper. Are you serious? Ronaldo gave a small, knowing smile. You said you were supposed to be a footballer. Let us see if you still are. The weight of those words crushed Matthias's chest with emotion. This was more than just a moment of kindness. This was a test, a challenge, a second chance. The cameras flashed wildly, capturing the historic moment. The internet would explode in minutes. Reporters were already crafting headlines. But Matthias heard nothing. He could not feel the cold anymore. He could not feel the hunger. All he could feel was hope. For the first time in years, he felt something stir deep within him, something long buried under the weight of loss, of pain, of endless nights on the streets. Belief. He stared at the boots in his hands, his vision blurring. This was not just about football. This was about proving to the world and to himself that he was still worth something, that he was not just a nameless shadow, that he was still alive. Ronaldo gave him one last look, then turned and walked toward his car. The crowd erupted in cheers, the energy electrifying. Matthias stood in the middle of it all, gripping the boots, feeling their weight, feeling their power. Tomorrow at 7 a.m., he would step onto a real football field, and this time he would not be watching from the sidelines. This time, he would play. Matthias did not sleep that night. He tried. He closed his eyes, curled up in the quietest corner of the shelter he had managed to find for the night. But sleep never came. His heart was too full, his mind too alive, replaying every single second of what had happened. Cristiano Ronaldo had spoken to him, given him his jersey, his boots, invited him to train with him. Every time he tried to convince himself that it had been real, doubt crept in. What if it had been a dream? What if he woke up in the morning to find himself still lying on the cold streets with nothing but hunger gnawing at his stomach? He clutched the jersey tighter. This was real. It had to be. By the time the first hint of dawn appeared on the horizon, Matthias was already on his feet, walking towards the training ground. He did not have a phone to check the time, but his instincts told him he was early. The city was still waking up, the streets quiet except for the occasional sound of birds and distant traffic. His hands trembled as he reached the massive gates of the Real Madrid training facility. He had spent years watching interviews and behind-the-scenes footage of players walking through these very doors. Now he was standing here himself. He took a deep breath. This was it. A security guard eyed him suspiciously as he approached. Matthias opened his mouth to explain, but before he could speak, a familiar voice called out from inside. "Let him in." Matthias turned sharply. It was Cristiano Ronaldo. Dressed in his training kit, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. But his presence alone was enough to send a jolt of electricity through Matthias's entire body. The guard stepped aside. Matthias walked in. Each step felt surreal. The moment he entered, the scent of freshly cut grass hit him, the sound of cleats tapping against the ground, the soft thud of footballs being passed around. He was inside a world he had only ever seen from the outside. Ronaldo walked ahead without saying a word, leading him toward the field where the rest of the team was already warming up. Some players gave Matthias curious glances, some barely spared him a look, and then the whispering began. Who is this guy? What is Ronaldo doing with him? He looks homeless. Matthias's stomach twisted. He had expected this. He had spent enough time being invisible to know when people were looking at him like he did not belong. But before insecurity could take hold, Ronaldo spoke. "Matthias, you are training with us today. Show me what you have got." Silence, then laughter. A few players exchanged amused looks. A homeless guy training with Real Madrid? It was absurd. One of the midfielders, tall, broad-shouldered, chuckled. "You sure about this, Cristiano? He does not even have proper gear." Ronaldo's jaw tightened. He did not respond. He just pointed at the ball. "Start the drills." Matthias swallowed hard, feeling every set of eyes burning into him. He had been given this chance, but now he had to prove he deserved it. The first few minutes were rough. His muscles were stiff, his body weak from months of malnutrition. Every sprint felt like running through quicksand. Every pass lacked the sharpness he once had. He could hear the quiet chuckles, the mumbled comments. But then, something clicked. He was on a real field, a professional field, and Cristiano Ronaldo was watching. Adrenaline kicked in. His instincts took over. His mind stopped thinking and his body remembered. The ball rolled toward him. He took his first real touch. It was smooth, effortless. Someone passed him the ball again. This time he moved faster. His feet controlled it with precision. His balance, his technique, it was still there, buried under the layers of exhaustion and hunger. Then, the moment came. The coach set up a small scrimmage. Matthias was placed on a team opposite to Ronaldo. It was now or never. The ball was passed to him. A defender rushed forward. Matthias took a quick step to the right, but at the last second he cut left instead, sending the defender stumbling in the wrong direction. There was a brief moment of stunned silence, then he kept going. A second defender closed in. Matthias did not stop. He moved with instinct and fire, weaving through like the player he used to be, the player he thought he had lost. Then, without thinking, he took a shot. The ball curled past the goalkeeper and slammed into the net. Silence. For the first time, the mocking smiles disappeared. Players who had dismissed him as a joke now watched him with something new in their eyes: respect. And Ronaldo. Ronaldo was smiling, a slow, knowing smile, as if he had expected this all along. The coach whistled. Again! Matthias's chest heaved, his lungs burning, but he nodded. He was not done yet. The next round, he passed with precision. The round after that, he won a ball off a midfielder who had underestimated him. And by the end of training, he was no longer just a homeless fan. He was a player. As they wrapped up, Ronaldo walked over, his expression unreadable once more. Matthias wiped sweat off his brow, his body aching but his heart pounding with something else. Something he had not felt in years. Hope. Ronaldo extended a bottle of water. You surprised them today. Matthias hesitated before taking it. Did I surprise you? A small smirk played at Ronaldo's lips. Not one bit. Matthias let out a shaky breath. Then, Ronaldo turned to the coach. What do you think? The coach, who had barely looked at Matthias before, now studied him carefully. He has something. A pause. But he needs proper training, nutrition, discipline. Ronaldo nodded. Then let us give it to him. Matthias blinked. Wait. What? The coach frowned. Cristiano, are you saying? Yes. Ronaldo turned back to Matthias. I am not giving you just one training session, Matthias. I am giving you a chance to rebuild your life. Matthias's world tilted. He gripped the jersey still clutched in his hands. His breath came out in short, shallow bursts. This was not just a moment of kindness. This was an offer, a future, a way out. His legs felt weak, the edges of his vision blurred, and before he could stop them, tears spilled down his face. Ronaldo clapped a hand on his shoulder. Welcome to your new beginning. Matthias stood on the edge of the training ground, his breath still ragged from the session. His body ached in ways he had not felt in years, but his heart pounded with something much stronger: purpose. Every fiber of his being trembled with disbelief. Had this really happened? Had Cristiano Ronaldo really just told him he was not done yet? The other players had left, murmuring among themselves about the homeless boy who had stunned them all. The coaches had exchanged quiet looks, some still skeptical, some intrigued. But Matthias's entire world had narrowed down to the one man standing in front of him, Ronaldo. And then, just when he thought this day could not get any more surreal, Ronaldo turned towards the media box, where cameras had been rolling the entire time. We are going to the press conference, Ronaldo said simply, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Matthias blinked. Press conference? He had spent years watching these events from a distance, on stolen glimpses of cafe televisions, from the glow of screens and shop windows. They were for legends, for superstars, not for him. But why? His voice barely rose above a whisper. Ronaldo's gaze was steady, unwavering. Because the world needs to hear your story. Matthias could not move. His feet were cemented to the ground. My story? What was there to tell? That he had lost everything? That he had begged, starved, and fought to survive on the streets? That he had lived for the game even when the game had forgotten him? What if they laughed? What if they dismissed him the way people always did? Ronaldo must have sensed his hesitation because he placed a hand on Matthias's shoulder. Trust me. And somehow those two words were enough. Matthias followed him inside. The press room was packed. Journalists, photographers, news anchors, all waiting for Ronaldo. The moment he stepped in, flashes went off like lightning, illuminating the space in bursts of white light. Matthias stayed behind him, feeling completely out of place. He could feel the whispers, the questioning glances. Who is that? Why is he here? Is he a new signing? A youth player? A charity case? Ronaldo took a seat, motioning for Matthias to sit beside him. He hesitated for a moment before lowering himself into the chair. His hands clenched in his lap, his heart hammering. The moderator cleared his throat. "Cristiano, today's session was quite unusual. Would you like to explain why you brought this young man onto the field?" Ronaldo leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but commanding. "Because he belongs there." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. One journalist raised his hand. "You mean as a fan, right? You gave him an incredible experience today." Ronaldo's expression hardened. "No." His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Not as a fan, as a player." Stunned silence. Matthias felt his breath hitch. "Matthias is not just a boy from the streets. He is a footballer. And I will make sure his story does not end there." Gasps rippled through the audience. The air in the room shifted. Matthias's fingers tightened against his knees. His lungs burned. Had he just heard that correctly? The questions came flooding in. "Cristiano, are you saying you are giving him a contract? Will he be training with the team? Is this a one-time event, or do you actually believe he has potential?" Ronaldo took a deep breath. Then he dropped the bombshell. "I have already spoken to the club. Matthias will receive professional training, a proper home, and in a few weeks, he will have his first trial for a club." The room exploded. Cameras flashed wildly. Reporters spoke over one another, trying to process what they had just heard. Matthias's head spun. A home? A trial? He could not breathe. He turned to Ronaldo, his lips parting, but no words came out. Ronaldo simply smiled. "I told you, everyone deserves a chance." The news spread like wildfire. By the time they left the press room, Matthias's face was everywhere. Sports websites, Twitter trends, Instagram posts. Cristiano Ronaldo changes homeless fans' life. From the streets to a pro trial, unbelievable story of Matthias. Ronaldo's unexpected act of kindness breaks the internet. Everywhere he turned, he saw his own name. For the first time in years, he existed. And yet, a small part of him still feared it would all disappear. That fear stayed with him as he entered the apartment Ronaldo had arranged for him, his first real home in years. It stayed with him as he lay on a real bed, staring at a ceiling that was not open sky. And it was still there weeks later when he stood on the edge of his first real match as a professional player. The trial had been tough, grueling, but he had passed. He had earned a spot with a second division club, a chance to prove himself on a professional level. As he stepped onto the field, the weight of the moment pressed against his chest. The crowd was smaller than a Real Madrid stadium, but to him, it felt like the world. And then, his eyes found him. Cristiano Ronaldo, sitting in the VIP box, watching. Matthias swallowed hard, his hands curled into fists. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The whistle blew. The match began. Matthias moved like his life depended on it. Every touch, every pass, every run. It was sharper, faster, more precise than ever before. He was not just playing football, he was reclaiming himself. Then, the ball came to him. He was at the edge of the penalty box. The defenders rushed toward him. The goalkeeper braced himself. For one split second, Matthias saw his entire past flash before his eyes. The cold nights, the hunger, the pain. And then, he let it all go. He struck the ball. It soared through the air, curling just beyond the keeper's reach. The net rippled. Silence. Then, the entire stadium erupted. Matthias fell to his knees, his chest heaving. He had done it. He had really, truly done it. As he looked up, his vision blurred with tears. And in the stands, Ronaldo stood, clapping. When the match ended, Matthias walked toward him. The cameras were flashing, the reporters waiting. But in that moment, it was just the two of them. Ronaldo pulled him into a hug and whispered, "I told you. You just needed one chance." Matthias closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he felt whole. Not a homeless boy, not a forgotten dream,